And thank you all for your presentations. Lovely to welcome a neighbour from Dublin Central, but to you all very much, you're very welcome. And I just want to say, I suppose, at the outset that as a public representative, I really do value the work of residents' associations, and I say that as well as a resident. I think it's incredibly valuable work. It is done voluntarily. It is an enormous effort for people to take time out of their busy lives and take it on. So I want to thank you for that and thank the people that you represent today. Just in terms of the bill and the legislation, residents' associations, and the chair explained, it's a difficulty for us to get representative groups, but would you think it is fair for us to assume that residents' associations are largely made up of homeowners? Like, they don't really generally represent renters or homeless. Would you say that's a fair assumption?
Could I take that question? As a general principle, residents' associations represent homeowners. Yeah. You will see, however, if you look at a list of objectors which we did submit, there's an awful lot of management companies. And I suspect in many cases, management company objectors are representing a tenant. Well, they're probably more representing owners of apartments than tenants. I suspect tenants frequently don't take much of an interest in this. But you are correct. Residents' association, I think, would be predominantly owners.
Okay, that's what I thought you would confirm that. So I suppose my first question then is, and your statement states that it's wholly impractical for residents' association to list its members in an appeal to An Bord Pleanála. Can you talk through what the impracticalities of that are?
Well, again, just to take I'm the treasurer of my residents' association, and we are trying increasingly to get people to pay their subs directly to the bank. And you're all familiar, the bank allows 16 characters. So what we want to know is that the resident of 88 Parkmore Drive is the member, as far as we're concerned, rather than Brendan Heenahan. And the bank can only capture an address. The other practical difficulty we see, there are loads of practical difficulties we see with it. I mean, I think if I put in a list of 200 members of my resident association, if someone has died, the developer may well say that person is dead, they can't be a member, we're up the High Court, Supreme Court. If there's somebody that if we've mistranscribed an envelope, we don't list somebody and somebody figures that out. I mean, I don't see what the use is. I have about 300 members if you include partners. I don't see what the use is in having a list of 300. It's a major problem for me to put together. It gets in the way of doing it online. Undoubtedly, people would be horrified that their names would appear in planning appeals, and it would probably mean that people, if we told them that this had to happen, they'd probably say, I don't want to be a member of the Residents' Association. So I think it's a stupid provision. And I think Pauline can probably confirm what I'm saying.
We do keep a register of our residents. We have a road by road, names and addresses, etc. But I know exactly what Brendan's saying. They would run a mile if we asked them to sign a document. It's always, you do it, you're very good at it.
So sorry, Pauline, go ahead.
I would just like to say something about that. I live just off Blessington Street, which is the north inner city, in the cottages there, and we have about 150 residences. Prior to COVID, a lot of the rental properties would change every 6 months, every 9 months, whatever. Keeping up with that was quite considerable. We now have more rentals than we do homeowners, as old people have died off and their cottages have been sold. But there's still an instability. Rental people are not so keen on getting involved in submissions as homeowners are. But added to that, we had an incident where one of our people who had worked for An Taisce did a submission against a local landlord for something that had previously been turned down by Dublin City Council as overdevelopment of the site. He put it in a few years later, and our member who had worked for An Taisce did a submission to Dublin City Council, and then who turned it down. But all the post came to my house as the coordinator, and that man ended up in court because he attempted to assault me, as he found out where I...
If we wouldn't get into the
Right.
specifics.
It was a difficult situation whereby the person to whom the mail went, it was a difficult situation.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Mandel wants to come in and then.
I'd just like to speak to those two questions. They're extremely good questions, particularly the one about renters. The DDPA has been trying to engage because they actually don't have a voice, and they're at least a third of our inhabitants. I don't know the solution. We've reached out to ICATU. It's very difficult to get engagement, but it's a real challenge, and it's really important. So I really appreciate that you're making that point. On the second one about the names, it's a little bit. The easiest answer to that is that, as with companies, as with associations, as with whatever, there is safety in a group. The minute that you have to put your name and address without the security of that group behind you, you get intimidated. That's the worry.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay, so my next question was going to be, I'm presuming that you all welcome the ending of the SHG process, the build to rents and the co-living, all of that being abolished. So that's all really good. I guess then the next point, and you mentioned it about the development plan, I suppose, and that's our strategic planning. And you feel very frustrated. I think the frustration is very real, as expressed, that you make submissions, you engage in what is a very lengthy process, and you feel that none of the proposals that you make are actually reflected in the final document, or the public officials, I think, is who you name. What do you think can be done to improve residents, citizens, renters' engagement in the development plan process? Because you have councillors, you have city councillors, they own the plan. You have county councillors, they own the plan. So is that where you're pointing to the disconnect between the residents, the tenants and the councillors, or is it something else? And I appreciate but the development plan is a big one, because you mentioned the timing there as well, and you know, one proposal here is to go to a 10-year plan, but the objective of doing that is to try and improve the quality of the strategic planning. Now, maybe we have to come back to it in another round.
I think we can come back to it, because development plans, local area plans, etc., are being replaced, and I think that's an important aspect of it.